So they understand what the outcome would be if they did separate it. They do separate down the road, right? Like they do at that point know what their support payments would look like. They understand, what's going to happen with the house, what's likely to happen with the kids. And so again, understanding those worst case scenarios, right, in their mind, make them not so scary anymore because they're no longer unknown.
Hey, it's Stephanie. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Unwritten. Unfortunately, we are not in the same room, but we're here in spirit. So thank you so much for being here, Shaunis Mercer.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And you are a family law attorney. So I have so many questions as a woman who's been divorced twice. I wish I had you in my back pocket years ago, but I'm so grateful that you're here now. So please tell me a little bit about what kind of drew you to this field.
Yeah, so I didn't think that I would start out doing divorce, right? That's what everybody thinks of when they think about family law. We've got lots of different areas within there, but divorce is the big one. But when I was 25 years old, that was not what I was thinking that I would do. But I started out in a small town where you did a little bit of everything, and I was really drawn to family law because it's not just about your legal expertise, but it's really understanding people and relationships. And that really tied in with just who I am as a person. I tend to be very empathetic, intuitive, really enjoy that human connection and authenticity. And family law really allowed me that opportunity to get to know people and their lives and see how I could help them.
And you do things a little bit differently with family law. You think of how peacefully can we move through this process so that the real healing can occur.
Absolutely. I think that we as attorneys can make things worse or better. All the professionals really that get involved in a divorce case either make them better or worse. And for me, I think it's really important that I help people to heal and move forward instead of like igniting like their worst base instincts. It's my job to stay above all of the emotions that come with that and go beyond. The big thing is that when you're at that crossroads and you're having that first meeting with an attorney, one thing that I would look out for is, is this somebody who is making me feel better or somebody that's making me feel worse? And I think a lot of times people get caught in the fear tactics of, like you're going to end up with no money, you're going to end up with nothing if you don't fight. And understanding that, what we should be talking about is like, what do you want for your life to look like in 6 months? What do you want your life to look like a year from now? And then figuring out solutions to help you get there. That's more of the approach that I take. I think that you can absolutely have protections, make sure that you're not missing out on anything that you're entitled to, but do it in a way that is more positive than fear-based and negative. I don't see what we gain in that except for causing people to spend a whole bunch of money that maybe they don't even have to spend.
So I was on TikTok earlier today, and this woman was talking about how she walked away with nothing from her divorce. And I'm not recommending that, but she thought that the years that it would take fighting in court, that she could make that money back and live a fuller, more happier life by just letting it all go and starting over. And I think that's so important to think about because, when we're going through these hard things in life, everybody has an opinion on how we should do things. And most people haven't been through it before. So having you on the podcast as somebody that goes through this every day and helps clients go through it every day is so powerful. So how do you, when somebody comes to you and let's say it's divorce, but we can talk about death or cancer or anything because you do estate planning as well. But what is some of the first things that you kind of help them with as far as dispelling what the worst case scenario, what your neighbor said down the street happened to her?
Well, understanding what people's priorities are, what their goals are, what their past trauma is, and what fears they have are all really important so that we can put together a plan. I don't fault that woman that you saw on TikTok at all, right? Like she made a choice. And as long as that was an educated choice and she knew what she was giving up and what she was choosing to do, then like good for her. fighting for the sake of fighting, like, doesn't make sense if that doesn't protect your peace, if it doesn't further your goals. So that's sort of part of that first discussion that I have, is just understanding a little bit more about what are your worst fears? What is that thing that your neighbor said to you that's eating in your mind? Because we can't even have a real conversation until I know that stuff and we can get that out of the way. So I'll answer those like pop questions immediately that people have so that we can deal with that top of mind stuff, and then we can dig in deeper and understand what your options really are. And we can go through every single scenario, that can come up. Well, what happens if he doesn't want to work together? What happens if, he loses his job in 6 months and I've been financially dependent? Like, what does my future look like? The way that my own anxiety works is I sort of deal with like worst case scenario. And if I can understand what the worst case scenario is and what like my options are in that situation, then I'm not afraid of it anymore. So then we can work backwards from there and talk about, okay, realistically, we've talked about the worst stuff, but what's most likely to happen? And then how can we proceed down this path?
And what do you find is the women's biggest fear when they first approach you?
So if they have children, generally it's related to the kids. I think that a lot of times people who have been primary parents are really afraid of what happens when that their world is disrupted and they're not able to see the kids every single day, or somebody who the parent who hasn't been responsible for carpool and snacks has to pick up some of those things and do them. Like, what happens if they're not done exactly right? So that's usually top of mind for parents that I work with, especially primary caretaker parents that I've worked with. For folks without kids, a lot of times it's about the financial stability of everything that they've worked so hard for. Like, how do they move forward if they're going to lose half of that? What does that financial situation look like? So those are the two things. And then for both groups of people, with kids or without kids, pets are a big hot topic in my office. What are we going to do with the family pets?
Yeah. And I mean, you would have to work with people's worst fears then, kids
Yeah.
and money and pets. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that like it's impacting other lives and being, right? Your choices, it's not just about money. It's about, I mean, it's about, your in-laws that you're close to. It's about networks of friends that, how that's going to happen. And I'll tell you that like when you're duking it out in court, when, people come in thinking, oh, I want a shark or I want a bulldog. They always want an animal to represent them, not a person, which is really interesting. But whenever people are going to duke it out in court, there is going to be collateral damage. There is going to be an impact on those other relationships in your life. It's just a fact. So if we can keep it from getting to that point, we can minimize that fallout and we can have more control and do things on our own terms to where really both of you can come out being able to maintain those relationships, or with a better shot of being able to maintain those relationships than you would have if you're throwing dirt at each other in a courtroom.
yeah. And that's such a huge thing to when you're with somebody, I'm sure. Okay. Because you already said it. What do you want your life to look like 6 months from now and a year from now? Do you want to somehow have a relationship with this other person? Do you want to co-parent, co-dog parent? And I think when you're stuck in that fear state, you're not thinking about tomorrow. You're thinking about the past. You're thinking about the hurt, and you're thinking about how can I get even? How can I get ahead? And yeah, it's super important to think about emotionally, how can I make this work?
Well, especially if there's been like a big betrayal,
Yeah.
if there's been something that is unexpected, that the person that you thought that you knew maybe made some choices that you didn't know about, and now you're having to recover. And that could be infidelity, it could be like a relationship infidelity, it can also be financial infidelity. That's a big one that I see too, where somebody's been hiding some like financial stuff from the other person, and then maybe you think that you don't value that relationship anymore. But again, like how you feel in that moment versus how you're going to feel 6 months from now, how you're going to feel a year from now. I think it's really important to bring it back and make sure that you understand that the choices that you make today are going to have an impact on your life long term, not just the other person.
And your relationships as
And your
well.
relationships with other people, not just
Right.
that other person.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Do you have any advice for people that are in maybe that beginning stage of relationships, questions that they should ask on those first couple dates? Because I just had a relationship coach on, and she was talking about specific questions that she asks. So, do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I do a lot of premarital agreements as well, prenups. And like, I think that it's funny because that's right before marriage. And so a lot of times people are having conversations at that point that it's shocking to me that they didn't have those conversations on the first or second date, because to me, a lot of those things would be deal breakers. And look, like everybody's deal breakers are different. So I think that for me, the idea is I would know what are your deal breakers? Like what are the things that are really important to you? You know, is it important to you that you meet somebody who's aligned in faith? Is it important to you that you meet somebody who's aligned in like travel and adventure or having kids, right? Like I have people like right before they're getting married who are just having that conversation about what their family structure is going to look like. And if you can identify those things early on and just ask the questions. A lot of times I think that in relationships we're so afraid because we are connected. We do feel this like natural attraction to the other person. We don't want to mess it up by asking the hard questions. But oh my gosh, how much worse is it going to hurt if you've developed this deep bond with somebody and then you realize that you're just incompatible, your lifestyle, if it's not something you can work through. Um, they're like, oh, well, like we'll figure that out down the road. I'm sure that once we have that connection, we'll be able to navigate it and figure it out. It does not get easier.
Yeah. Oh, like I'll change their mind.
Really?
That's
You've been there?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all have, right? In relationships of just not understanding. And you would think that as you get older, that you get better at it. But I mean, certainly I see for some of my clients that those patterns and mistakes do repeat themselves because they don't take the time
Right.
to get to know themselves and to understand that there are deal breakers, that there are things that are just never going to be okay, and that it's okay to spend some time alone and to not have the another person that's a bad fit. It's important to find somebody who's the right fit. And that doesn't mean that like you're exactly the same, right? Like there's a lot of ways that we can complement each other and be different. But if there is a deal breaker, I do think it's really important that you acknowledge that and discuss that earlier than later in a relationship.
Yeah. I think that as a people pleaser, I'll just speak for myself that I never wanted to rock the boat. I wanted the people that I was dating to like me. I would, and I'm only saying this because I believe that a lot of women especially do it. I know men do it too, but we want to become the partner that we perceive the other person that they need us to be. And I don't know where that started, but I do feel like, for me at least, my 2 divorces happened because I created a persona of myself that I thought the other person wanted me to be, and you can only do that for so long, and then all of a sudden you're exhausted.
Exhausting. Yeah.
Um, do you
And
see
that's
that
like
often?
no way to live,
No,
right? Because at
oh,
some
absolutely
point,
not, and we can't keep that up forever. We can put things in place, we can stay really busy, we can do all the things, but eventually you realize that.
and there was a huge rash of divorces during COVID, right? It was on the news, like everybody was talking about it. Yeah, COVID divorce. But it's because life slowed down and because you couldn't busy yourself with all of those things in life that we get distracted with or attempt to distract ourselves with. And you had to get to know this person that was living in your house or deal with the person that was living in your house. And there was like some polarizing stuff that was happening in the world at that time. So there were some conversations that were happening that maybe hadn't happened in houses before.
Yeah, and kids that went off to college, everyone was home.
Everybody was home. It
Yeah,
was a lot. It was a lot in my house. I mean, but
yeah.
you sort of had to deal with it and the way that you handle conflict. Those things came to a head at that point because there was conflict because everybody was at home.
Yes. So another thing that we're kind of bringing up, I feel, or leading to is financial independence for women, super important, so that even if you find yourself in a divorce situation, but also when we talk about estate planning, and that's something I just went through this year was planning my estate. I got life insurance for the first time. And again, because I'm a single woman, I didn't think that I had enough stuff that warrants an estate planning. So, but what I learned is I do. And there's a lot more to estate planning, for instance, or maybe this is the will. I did both of them, but end of life care and when and who's going to say what and who's going to and so let's talk about that a little bit from your perspective.
Yeah. So you've hit exactly on it, right? Like people think that it's big and fancy folks who need to be worried about estate planning, but it's I mean, in a lot of ways, it's those of us who, are in that still building stage of our life that need to be really thoughtful and mindful of those things. And it's something that there's sort of two components of it, right? There's the happens if I'm still alive, but I need somebody else to be making choices for me because I can't make those choices. And then what happens when I'm gone? And so the part of, who's making choices while I'm alive for me, we call that incapacitation protection. So, when you can't make those choices for yourself. And choosing the who is the most important thing. And this comes up for everybody. It comes up for the 18-year-old who maybe is coming from a bad home situation and he doesn't want his parents to be making those choices anymore. Like he's getting out of an abusive family, but he has his people that he does trust and rely on that he wants to make those choices, not his next of kin to be making those choices if something were to happen to him. There's, the early adult who has formed like a deep committed relationship but isn't married, but their partner is who they want to be making choices for them if something happened, not their parents. Or maybe it's somebody who does want their parents to be making those choices for them, but one of the two parents, not both of the parents, to be making a choice if their parents are no longer together. And then for divorced folks, especially, like you're coming out of this relationship and you want somebody, you want to say who that person is because you're a full grown adult and you've got your relationships that matter to you, and you want your best friend to be able to be the one because she knows you best and she knows what you would want. You want for her to be the one who makes sure that your bills get paid on time, who's going to see that Amex bill that you wouldn't necessarily want your parents to see, to make sure that it gets paid if you're in the hospital. And you want for her to be the one who makes those really compassionate choices for you about end of life care that maybe your parents couldn't make because it would be too hard for them to make those hard choices. So that's the incapacitation planning piece that I think we forget about. It's not if you're dead, because if you're dead, like those things don't matter as much anymore. But it's when you're alive to make sure that when you wake up, that everything has happened the way that you would have wanted it to have happened. And then when you're gone, it's who are the people that are going to make sure that your wishes get followed and that the people that you want to continue your legacy have the ability to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you said so much amazing information right there that if anybody has not done their will and estate planning, I mean, you just nailed it right there. And it wasn't super expensive
I mean,
for
it's
like what I
doesn't
got.
have to be, right? Like that's the thing. It really can be affordable and it needs to get done.
It
And the
needs to get
life
done.
insurance thing, that to me is something that is, I'm very passionate about because it's something that I didn't think about that I needed. But again, when you're in that wealth building stage, we got a lot of expenses, right? We have a lot of things that we keep going, a lot of people that rely on us. And you want to make sure that they're not having to worry about those things when you're gone, on top of grieving and dealing with all of those other mechanics that need to be done. So life insurance is just a really good gift that you can give to the people that matter to you to make sure that you're leaving the legacy that you want to leave behind.
Yeah,
Not a
and
mess.
again, not crazy expensive. These are things that even as a single mom doing my thing, I was still able to afford, but I made it a priority to get it done. and it feels really good. And the other part of this is the like I was talking about the financial independence of a woman because we don't know. We think that we're even in a marriage that we're going to be taken care of, that or at least that was my this was my journey, was as long as I'm taking care of the house, taking care of the kids, I have some sort of income coming in. I was the support role in the relationships I was in. And again, comes back to like that people pleasing. And one day I just realized during COVID that I needed to up my business. I needed to have a business plan. I needed to make money that was going to sustain me in case something like a divorce or death or injury happened to my spouse. And I think so many women just we think about something like that or we think about life insurance or a will and then we're like, well we have other things to take care of. That's not important. And I think everything that we're talking about is really just this worthiness that I am important, that what I am doing is important and I need to be taken care of.
Right. And it's my stay-at-home mom friends that I'm encouraging the most to make sure that they have a good life insurance policy because who's going to do all that stuff if you're not around to do it and your kids are grieving and your partner is grieving and maybe not able to go to work every day and soldier on the way that he could before. Like you have tremendous value to your family and they will need those resources and it's hard to prioritize that. I feel like if you're not the primary earner in the family sometimes because it feels like you feel guilty speaking up about those things, but you're doing it as an act of love for your family.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about that wasn't even where I was going, but yeah, you're intuitive, which is amazing. Do you find that it's hard to be a sensitive, caring, intelligent woman in your field?
I mean, I, yeah, I think boundary lessons are something that I have to work on over and over and over again because I do get really connected with my clients. I do care personally very much about the outcome and what's happening. And for me, the way that I protect my peace in all of this, because like that was the goal of this law firm too when we started it, was that it's peaceful law for our clients, but it's also peaceful for us, that it's creating peace in our lives, is that we made a very distinct choice not to litigate. And so that was the boundary that we have. Whenever we come up against it, we remind ourselves why we created this boundary. Like my husband is a fantastic litigator. He was a prosecutor for 10 years, handling really high stakes, high level cases, but that came at a toll for our family, right? Because it meant that we missed out on going on family vacations because of the trial schedule. It meant that our kids had to get picked up later in the evening because both of us were working outside of the home. And so for us, we wanted to avoid that. For me, I didn't love litigation, but I was good at it. Which I know as a woman, like you're not supposed to say stuff like that, right? And like the parts that I was particularly good at were because of being intuitive, because of being sensitive, was picking up on things during cross-examination. So I would know when somebody was lying, and I would know how to hammer in just the right way to get the lie exposed. But that comes at a price, right? Like that is not building families up, that is tearing families down. And it might have been for a good purpose, but it's still hard at the end of the day to know that that's your job. And so for me, like we created that boundary that we were not going to litigate, that we were not going to do that work that's very important work that needs to be done if it gets to that point, but that we were not the people to do that because of the emotional toll that it took on our family at home. So we have great partners that we connect our clients with if ever there is a case that goes to litigation. But that's been so few and far between. I mean, I think that knowing what would happen if you had to fight can keep the fight at bay when you've got a good attorney on the other side, because they know too. And if we're all in agreement that we don't want to expose families to that sort of negativity and that sort of destruction, then we can figure it out and we can find an answer.
Do you find that because you take the time to get to know your clients and address the fears and address the long term, that sometimes people are like, well, maybe we just need therapy and we'll be okay?
Yeah. So, I think that everybody's afraid to come see a lawyer because that means the end in a lot of people's minds, right? Like, oh God, I took this step. There's no coming back from it. But I've completely been in those initial meetings with clients. We call them peaceful blueprint sessions because it's not a divorce consultation, because divorce might not be the alternative that we come up with in your plan for moving forward. So when somebody's sitting here with me talking about what it is that's going on at home, I ask a lot of questions. I ask what they've done in terms of therapy, who they've seen, because again, like having those deep connections within my community, I know a lot of the therapists around here. I know that there are some alternatives that maybe they haven't considered, like discernment counseling. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but
No.
it's where a couple can go in and talk to a therapist who can help them really work through whether they want to move forward together and they want to commit to their marriage, and then after that do marriage counseling, or whether it is time to consider separating and then working out a peaceful plan for the relationship as they navigate divorce. Like maybe they've never considered that before. Maybe they went to marriage counseling that wasn't the right fit for them, before they really worked through their why of if they were committed to staying or not. There was just the assumption that they were, which means that maybe they avoided some of those hard conversations that needed to be had. So yeah, there are a lot of times that I'll talk to people and send them home with therapy recommendations, like therapists that they can go talk to if they want, to see if they can save the marriage. But the difference this time when they go into therapy is that they're not stuck staying out of fear, because they had that conversation with me. So they understand what the outcome would be if they did separate. They do separate down the road, right? Like they do at that point know what their support payments would look like. They understand, what's going to happen with the house, what's likely to happen with the kids. And so again, understanding those worst case scenarios, right, in their mind, make them not so scary anymore because they're no longer unknown. And then they can make their choices about the relationship, not from a place of fear to where they're having to stay together, but because they're choosing that. And to me, that's pretty powerful. And it can really strengthen a relationship to know that you're there because you want to be and that you're committed to it, not just because you're afraid of what would happen if you didn't stay with that person.
Yeah, you are brilliant. And then, I mean, you should be going to therapy anyways if you're going through divorce, in my opinion,
100%.
finding whoever it is and whatever it is. Do you ever work with women and men, maybe where one of them is facing a terminal illness and kind of how to navigate that situation?
Well, so I've worked with people who are going through that both from an estate planning perspective, but also in a divorce perspective.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering for some reason. If sometimes it's better to get divorced financially for people facing when the other person's facing a terminal illness, or but still staying together, or
Yeah.
even the estate planning for sure. Like, what do you want? And
So I have seen that, where people want to talk through the financial implications of being a divorced individual versus being married through a terminal illness in terms of qualification for access to resources, that sort of stuff. But the thing that I've seen, I think that would be most surprising is I have a terminal illness. I don't want to die with this person. Like I've been treading water for all of these years, but I've only got so much time left. Like that is not the last face that I want to see when I die. And so that's been really surprising. Like it's not just been like one or two people either in my career.
no, it's super honest.
And
Super
I think it's really like brave, but sometimes I've seen it in other contexts too, right? Like when you're facing terminal illness, like that's not so scary anymore. The idea of being alone, or not being partnered isn't so scary because you've got your support network or you've got your principles that you realize like maybe that's the priority. It puts things into perspective really quickly, I think. So I've seen that. And then from an estate planning side, and more of like the financial planning, there is that piece of, you know, estate planning attorneys, like sort of the joke is when you first start doing it, you say, well, if you die, no, we're all dying. It's when you die. But that's a really hard thing to say. Especially when you're talking to, a lot of my clients are in their 30s and so like they really don't want to be thinking about dying. And so, but like they need to think about it because they've got these young kids and we've got to make a plan. But when you're dealing with someone who's has a terminal illness, who knows that there's a pretty finite expiration date that's coming. Those when conversations are a little bit less theoretical. And so it is easier for them, I think, to really get into the nuts and bolts of the planning piece and to stop that avoiding, like, I'm going to jinx it and I'm going to die if I do estate planning mentality that sometimes other people get into.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome because even when even as I'm thinking about it, my estate planning, I was imagining it being far away. But if you just got in the mindset of like, what if I only had 5 months to live? Which I love that mindset because that's not tomorrow. It gives you some time to really think about how you want to spend your life. But then you get things in focus and I mean, there's my camera reference, but yeah.
Right. You can really like narrow in on what are those priorities. And I do think that that's a really good side benefit. And I've heard that from clients that, wow, this estate planning process has really made me realize I need to make some life choices now. That some of these things that I've been delaying, like getting out of debt, that's a big one when you're thinking about like how some of those choices might impact the people that you care about if you're not here to sort of clean up your messy room anymore.
Mhm.
That you need to deal with some of that stuff now, like literally purging, especially my clients who maybe are empty nesters. It's a really good time when you're doing the estate planning to realize your kids don't want all your stuff, like all of that the accumulated like material things aren't what it's about, and that it's probably time to do some purging. So there are a lot of things that are triggered, I think, with that estate planning, even if you're not correlating it to I only have 5 months to live, but you're having to think about death. You're having to think about that your life is finite. And a lot of us don't really like to think that way. But if you're already in that mode, might as well be productive with it and make something happen.
If you could give someone 5 pieces of advice from your perspective, legalities, what would they be? And I know this is off topic a little bit, so if you need a minute, but just like the things that you've learned for yourself, what would you give advice to others?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We'll sort of go through a couple of them. I think I won't just like crank them out
Yeah, yeah,
immediately.
thoughtful discussion for sure.
I mean, like the first one is just tell the truth. And I
Mm,
know it seems so silly, but so many of the problems that I've seen are from people like either just lying outright or holding back and not feeling empowered to speak their truth. So it,
you're like kidding me. That
right?
empowerment to
It's
speak truth is so hard.
it's hard, and especially if you're a people pleaser, right? But it's everything from I don't like my eggs that way that then like builds up into and he never made the eggs the way that I wanted them. It's like those little like cracks of dishonesty and like call it what it is. When we don't speak our truth, we're not being honest.
Right. Yeah.
So that to me is a big one. It always comes back to haunt you. So that's the first one.
Love it.
The second one is to be proactive, not to bury your head in the sand, which sort of goes along with that first one, I think. But like when you see something, say something, because if you don't and you just let those little things build and you don't acknowledge and deal with them, it's going to become a much bigger and harder problem when you can't take it anymore and you do have to say it. So when I'm sitting here talking to somebody who is talking to me about wanting to separate, I can think of a million little times that as they're telling their story where I'm like, well, like, but why didn't you say something then? Or why didn't he say something then? Why did it build into this thing to where, because there is a point where it's too late. I mean, there's a point where you can't go back and change things, but there are a million little stops along the way to where you do have the opportunity to at least see if things can be different, to at least see if there's a different path forward. But so many times we're afraid because you have to deal with it.
Yep.
And you are going to have to communicate and have a confrontation. And we don't want that. We
Yeah.
just figure we'll just stick it out. We'll just grit our teeth and it'll be okay. Let's see. What are we up to now?
We're at 2.
I'm at 2.
So,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
tell the truth, and when you see it, say it.
Yeah. When you see something, say something. It's always a good policy. And yeah, then I guess another is to make sure that you're being authentic, which again, like goes along with telling the truth. But it's, you said something earlier about wanting to be that ideal partner for somebody else, of trying to sort of mold yourself into what it is that you think that they want. Knowing yourself, I think, helps with your ability to form relationships, your ability to make decisions and know what you want, what your values are. And when you're authentic and true to yourself and you're honest with yourself about that, I think that it's going to lead you down a path that you won't have as many regrets at the end of your life than if you were not authentic and true to who you are.
Yeah. So, I mean, you are just talking about communication.
Communication, I get, like, really that's what it all boils down to, right? Is that. And then, like, I guess a practical piece of advice is, financially, I do see people who have made some poor financial choices, and that's okay, right? Like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to save every penny from the time that you're 20 years old, but like, don't just continue down a bad path, right? Be able to like divert when it's time and change your financial focus so that you didn't just like keep throwing away opportunity after opportunity. And so I see that like with debt that snowballed, where people just don't want to deal with it, which probably comes back to communication too. But
Yeah.
because, that you don't want to have to say to your partner, like, look, I know that we've been going out to eat 3 times a week since we got married, but I'm looking at the bills, I'm looking at the numbers, and we're going to have to do something different if we ever want to be able to retire. Like, sometimes you do have to have that conversation instead of just like continuing down this bad path financially. Or it could be, like, it's not just debt related, right? It could be like going to a job that makes you unhappy every single day and sticking with that. Like, that can still be a bad financial decision, even if it seems like you would make more money on that path, because at some point you're not going to be able to stick with that anymore. And then you're going to be in a way worse situation if you've got 20 years of experience in a field that you don't enjoy, and then you've got to pivot. So
Yeah.
recognizing when you need to make that financial change earlier, I think, is very beneficial.
Yeah. I mean, all of these are really great. There's an aspect of joy that I hear you kind of saying with your job and whose face you want to see at the end of your life and being authentic. I don't think as a society we give ourselves enough permission to find joy. And, when we see people switching jobs a lot or changing spouses or changing homes, it's scary to us. So it's fearful, but it's okay to make pivots and changes because at the end of the day, it is our life and we have to make the most of it.
I mean, right, you said it. Do you think that like some of that, like the people we're worried about people judging us, we're worried about what people will think if we do all this, like, why are they thinking that though? Like, is it because they are upset that we're happy because we didn't follow the path that they followed and stayed miserable? I mean, and do you really care what those people think?
Right. And yeah, I mean, if they can't see the treasure that you are, then that's on them. But it's a really constant reminder for myself to keep moving forward and not letting the past take over or keeping the past in the past and the future in the future and the present in the present. If we start thinking about like, oh, I bet you so and so, I hurt so and so's feelings, or anyways, this is a whole nother topic, but finding that joy and yeah.
But it's true, right? I think I'm up to 5 now. That brings, but like what you said, right? Like all of this comes together, and it's about who you surround yourself with, right? Like what are those people that you're surrounding yourself with? Are they building you up? Are they helping guide you in the direction that you want to go, or are they like an anchor that's pulling you down? I mean, I
Yeah.
I've seen it with like when I was in delinquency court with juveniles, right? Like who were the kids around, right? Like that impacted the decisions and choices that they were making, the people that were able to find friends that helped lift them up and that they were able to lift up were able to get away from bad circumstances more easily than kids who were stuck in negative environments. I see it with people who have wealth, right? Like when they surround themselves with people who are like-minded in values, in how they believe they should grow their wealth. They tend to be happier and wealthier people that live in a space more consistent with their values. When, there's a reason why people joke that divorce is contagious. And I don't think that's necessarily like a bad thing either. Because like sometimes divorce is necessary, but seeing somebody else go through it that you're close to, seeing them start to live more authentically can make you have a period of self-reflection where you figure out if you're in the circumstance that's right for you. So I think that having friendships, having professional relationships of people who build you up instead of pull you down is very important. And divorce doesn't have to mean a bad thing, and having friends that understand that and who aren't going to like push you to get divorced, but who are going to accept those choices and not be concerned because their Friday night card game is ruined if you guys aren't a couple anymore. Those are people that you want to surround yourself with.
Yeah. During my last divorce, I had a friend. She's like, "Can we just still all get together and have Friday night fish?" I'm like, "No."
Not probably not. But like I do have some clients that do
Yeah.
still hang out with their ex, like even if they don't have kids. And that's been the most surprising thing to me is that some people just work better as friends and in the friend group than they did as partners. And there's a lot of more openness to that and understanding that relationships aren't necessarily so binary these days, that they can evolve and they can grow.
Yes, I agree. And my ex and I are friends, but
Not fish.
I never particularly appreciated Friday night fish with the couple and him. So I like that was like a win for me when I didn't have to do that anymore. I mean, yeah, we all have decisions to make, and it's alignment, it's authenticity, and not being afraid of what's next.
Yeah. No, that's big. But like it can be kind of scary, but reframing that into excitement.
Yes, yeah. I mean, excitement is you can easily reframe fear into excitement. So, how this has been so insightful, and I appreciate your energy and your knowledge and this conversation so much. How can people find you? And do you have a blog or anything? Like, how are you expressing yourself with all this information?
Yeah, so I have a social media presence through my firm, and so I think that you've got those socials that we can share. And I do try to do just little short like question answer socials because it's not about advertising, it's about giving like practical information to people that are going through it. And our blog on our website also is geared towards really practical tips. If you want to come in and do an analysis of your specific financial situation and you're here in North Carolina, great. Like welcome that. Love finding well-aligned clients that I can connect with. Always great. But also, there's just general practical information that I want for everybody to have and to know about family law stuff, about co-parenting, about estate planning. And so we put out as much as we can on our blog that can help people with just practical tips of things that they need to know. I've got a YouTube channel where we do some shorts and I do some longer form videos also of just different topics that I think would be helpful for people that are going through transitions in their family.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. I will add all of that to the show notes, and I did get a bio from you, so I believe all those links are in there. And if not, I'll just ask
Yeah,
you.
just let me know. We'll send them over. I
Okay,
appreciate
well,
it.
Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, it's so good to talk to you today. I felt at home. I feel like that, it's really good to connect with somebody who really wants for your listeners to get good information, and that
Yeah.
it's so clear that you have gone through such a journey and that you're able to bring what you've experienced and bring that like power of transformation to other women or other people who are experiencing the same thing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Bravery was not something I was born with, so it's a muscle that I have to continuously flex and work because I think it's important.
It is, and it brings so much to yourself, but to other people too. So it's
Yeah.
a gift.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
It's so good to talk to you. All right.
Before we end, I am going to let you know I'm about 2 weeks out, so I'll send you a link when this gets out, and then I'll have little shorts and stuff too for you if you want to share them.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, we'll cross post everything. So I appreciate that. Christian is the one who messaged you today. He's the one who keeps my socials up because I don't like I do them, but he's got to post them because otherwise I won't get it done.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, I'll make sure I connect with him.
If you don't mind, awesome.
Of
I
course. Oh
appreciate
yeah.
it.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Talk to you
It's so
later.
good talking to you.
You too. Bye
All
bye.
right. Have a good day. Bye.